Welcome to Friesen Art Vector Basics, where we're going to use Google Drawings, which you can type into your search bar, to make a basic vector drawing. And it doesn't have to be basic, it'll start off that way, but you can keep building it. So you can search it up, Google Drawings is there. It doesn't show up in your waffle on the top right, I'm not sure why. But make sure that you are logged into the right Google Gmail. So it opens up and we've got this blank canvas. I recommend naming anything before you start, even if you don't have a perfect name for it, just something to distinguish it. Then we've got our undo and redo buttons, which are great, and you can go Command Z or Control Z on a Windows keyboard. Then we have zoom. Zoom really helps us get in close when we need to. It helps out. Select, we can select objects. Line, there's lots of different lines we can use. We won't use them too much today unless you're doing something more specific than what we're doing. Then we've got shapes, which we'll use a lot. Text, you can add images, which we will do just for a reference. And then shapes, going back to shapes, we've got all these different ones, rectangles, squares, circles, all those things. So let's just start by clicking on shapes, dragging a shape out. So we've got a rectangle. You can see it's got this light blue color on the inside. It's got a gray border along the outside. And so those can be changed at any moment. You make sure and select the shape if you want to change this shape specifically. And then you can also rotate it. There's a few things you can do once you've put down any shape. You can rotate, you can change the size for the length and width, any of that stuff. So it's very elastic, and the thing that you put down doesn't have to be perfect. You can make it perfect through a series of adjustments. Looking back up here, you can fill the color, you can change the color for the border, we can change the thickness of the line, and then we can change the line to dashes or dots. If we look at fill color, if I click on that, click on orange, boom, it is fully filled with orange. If I click on border, and I change it to blue. Now if I click away, you can see that's got a thin blue border around the whole edge of it. You can take that off as well. Here's where you change the thickness of the line. So I made it quite a bit bigger. You can see it's more prominent now, and it changes the whole thing. So it's very easy to use. So 12 point. And then if I go to the dots and dashes, it doesn't come up often, but you may want to use it depending on what you're making. So now I'm gonna select it one more time, and I think I'll go back. So there you can see it disappeared. You can click on something and also hit delete and it will go away. You can also use those forward and back buttons if you want to go back. So right now I'm gonna get a reference photo. So if you already have your photo, you can click on the little picture to insert it. However, I don't have mine yet. So I'm going to go over to the search engine. I'm going to do a camera. It's got a great shape, and there's just some basic shapes involved to build it. So I'm going to go for a vintage camera. I'm going to click on images. And for this, you're not going to keep the photo afterwards. And so it's okay if it's copyrighted because you're just going to use it as a reference. You're not going to copy it perfectly. You don't need to pay for anything. And plus you're making student work. So you're probably not going to be selling this thing, so you don't have to worry about copyright. So I'm searching around, I'm looking, I click on this one because it looks nice. And now that it's big, I'm going to drag this image to my desktop so that then I can drag it into my Google Drawing. So we'll flip back, and so you can use the button or you can just drag it and drop it right in there, which I usually do. So nice picture of a camera. You can see it's got circles and rectangles in there. I'm going to shrink it down. And the nice thing about Google Draw is you can just take it off to the side. So it doesn't even have to be on the canvas or digital page. It can just be off to the side as something to look at every once in a while to get those basic shapes. So you can see we've got a bigger rectangle, then we've got a smaller rectangle on top, and an even skinnier one, and we've got the lens, which is circular, and it's got a few circles in there. So working with vectors, it's going to be really easy to make this thing. You can see we've got a bunch of rectangular choices, and so I'm going to pick the one with rounded sides and see if that looks good when I lay it down. So I've clicked on the one that I want. I can drag and then let go of my mouse. So there we go. It's got rounded edges. And I don't know if I like the look of that. I know the camera has rounded edges, although it looks pretty square. So I'm going to go Command Z and get rid of it. And here we go. Now I've just got perfect rectangulars with those square edges. And now I want to change the fill. So I noticed that the camera is kind of this light gray where the metal is. And you've got solid colors here, and you can customize colors, but then you also have these gradients. And since we're working with metal, the camera is metal for a lot of the parts, and glass, it's might work really nice to have a gradient going on. So I'm going to choose this light gray gradient. I've got the body of the camera here. And so the body of the camera is going to be multiple rectangles. So I'm going to head on up to Edit, and you can see we've got Copy, Command C. And so that's what I did. I copied that rectangle, and then to paste is Command V. I usually use the shortcut keys because that makes it so much quicker. I can move the first rectangle onto the second. I match it up nicely and then shrink it from the bottom going up so that now I've got the top portion and the bottom portion as well. So I'll end up making 3 rectangles for the main body of this thing. So I'm going to select both rectangles at the same time by just dragging. And I'll change the line width because I'd like it to be a little bit wider. So try 4. 8 seems like too much. I'm going to go back to 4 pixels wide. And that seems, yeah, I like this. So now I think I'm going to keep all of my shapes the same width for the border colors. Now I'd like to change where you actually grab onto the camera, that kind of blackish gray part. I'm going to change that. I'm going to keep the gradient. And now I'm going to copy and paste the smaller portion that looks like metal. And I move it down. And on my reference photo, there's just a tiny bit of gray metal on the bottom, and it shrinks down. So I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. I'm going to adjust it, make sure it's just right on the bottom. Sometimes it takes an extra minute. And there we go. I've got the body of the camera pretty much made. That's a good start. So I'm going to select the whole thing, and I'll right click, and I'm going to look at center on page. So horizontally and vertically. So this is kind of nice when you're just building one object out to center it, because then if you do need to put things in the center, which we will with our lens, it makes it easier because there's actually guidelines. If I select again and I move it off center, and then I start moving it back into the center, you can see these little red guidelines come up, this little crosshair, and that lets us know. So you can either use the button, or you can just grab everything and drag it around until you find the center. So I'm going to go for the next shape. We've got these rectangular pieces that you look through, and also a flash on the front of the camera. So they, again, are going to be rectangles pretty much. So I've chose square ones for the bottom. I chose rounded edged ones for these, just to have a little variety in there. It makes it a little more interesting to look at when the borders are a little bit different. So again, I'll adjust it to 4 just like I did everything else, just so all the lines match. And for these, there's going to be 2 about the same size, so I'm just going to copy and paste, drag the other one over, and I'll make this one a little bit smaller by dragging the edges in. Because I'm seeing on my reference photo, they're a little different. Again, I'm not copying this perfectly. I just want to make it look good. I'm going to make that black. And I'm going to keep the flash a little bit lighter. So I've got these little buttons on the top. I've got 2 buttons and this other little piece. So I'm going to go through these rectangles, and I choose one that's flat on the bottom, but it has 2 rounded edges on the top. You can see it really well now. And it's already got the right width on there, so that's perfect. I make it and then drop it right on that line, copy and paste using my hotkeys. Boom, boom. Then I slide that one over, And once again, to keep it interesting, not everything's the same. I'm going to shrink this one down a little bit more. So each piece is not exactly the same, because it does produce a certain look, which I'm not going for this time. Then I've got this little piece up here. It's just a tiny little metal button sticking up. I just copy and paste and shrink it down. And so you could do more with this flash. It's got a little lines in the reference photo. You could use the lines, but I'm not going to do that today. I don't want to make this video too long. So we're going to move on to the lens. We've got the round lens. We've got all these pieces. It's a bunch of circles. We've got maybe 3 or 4 circles that make up the lens. And so I'm going to choose a circle, and I hold down Shift and Option to make it a perfect circle. And then this is why I centered it before, so that now I can create that first circle piece for the lens. I'm going to put it right where I want it, so it's nicely in the center. I want to make it just a tiny bit. There we go. So now I've got one. I'm going to change it, make sure the border is the same. Instead of having a black outline, I think I want something a little bit different so that it stands out. And so I'm going to go the reverse. I'm going to make this light. And the inside, instead of a solid color, I'm going to go over to gradient and do a circular or a radial or a flat gradient. And that looks pretty good. That's a good start. So just like the other rectangular piece, I'm going to copy and paste that same round one. And I'm going to put it right in the middle with the crosshairs, and I'll drag from the outside, holding down Shift and Option to make it just a smaller but the same. And this time I'm going to rotate it so that, there we go, there's a little difference between the shadows on the 2 circles, and now it looks more 3-dimensional. So once again, I'll click and I'll copy and paste, and I'll take the same thing, put it in the middle, and now I'm going to change the border. Because everything's looking a little similar, I want to give a little bit of a darker border. I'll shrink that down first so I can see everything together. And I'll fill the inside with this dark, almost black, and it's a black gray gradient so that it looks 3-dimensional. Finally, I'm going to make this last one that's going to be part of the lens. And on the inside, you can see where the actual shutter flips open and closes. It's very, very dark. So I'm going to shrink this thing down. I'm going to make it pretty much solid black. Rotate it a little bit so we're getting the highlight in a different direction. And it looks okay, but the border does not look good. We don't want a border on this one. So this is the first time we're going to choose transparent at the bottom. So that means there's no border, you can't see any border, and it sits like there. Perfect. Now it looks way more 3-dimensional. And it's got some depth to it. So now when you look at the reference photo, we're seeing some of the highlights on the reflections on the actual glass part of the lens. So I'm going to shrink another circle down. It's not part of the lens, it's just reflecting off of it. So I'm going to make it small. It's going to go off to the side. I'm going to make it light, so it looks like light's hitting it. And I don't like the gradient. I think I want a solid white on there. There we go. That looks good. And one is okay. Let's adjust it over. But I think we're probably going to want a second one now after looking at it here. And this is the greatest part about being able to build and not doing it freehand, is that you can just adjust things as much as you want. I'm going to zoom in here so that I can put it in the right spot. It always helps when you're doing details to be zoomed right in, and you can go even further if you want, and then zoom out and take a look and see how it feels. And that is looking pretty good. I do like the look of that. And once you've clicked on the zoom, it's got a little magnifying glass. So if you click, it will zoom in again. And you can do more details. Like I'm going to leave it pretty basic on here. So you could do so many different details where you've got like writing on the camera, you've got screws, you've got a title, like a little name on there. I might do that. But there's lots of extra details you can put on here, but this actually looks good. This isn't basic, this is good. And so you could keep going further and further into this and develop it as much as you want. So let's straighten this up again. And now I'm thinking that I want to put a name on this camera, and I'm just going to put my own name. for lack of planning, it's going to be Friesen. And let's make it, the size looks pretty good. Let's change this, 'cause it doesn't look like a logo. There we go. That looks a little more retro, more like a logo. And I'm gonna go Friesen and Sons Co. company. There we go. That seems more authentic, even though it's fake. And I don't like it in the middle here. I think I do want to have it underneath the viewfinder like the original one. So I'm just gonna, again, being able to shrink things down or make them bigger and adjust your drawing at any point is the magic of vectors. So fantastic, the way you can do that. Okay. So now this is a great ending point. This is a good drawing here. However, if you want to take it a little further, you can do extra bits. You can see there's some lines going across the grip of the camera. So I'm going to show you that because we haven't looked at lines yet. I'm going to click on the lines and I'm going to go straight line, just the top one. I'm going to go click and drag. Whoops, I didn't drag. Command Z. So I'll make sure I'm on my line again. Click and drag across, making sure to hit both ends of it. And you might be thinking, well, why is he drawing these lines across the lens? Like, it's too late for this. But the great thing about vector drawings is we can layer things. We can relayer them. We can reorder all these little pieces, all these circles and rectangles that we've made. So now I'm going to copy and paste this line because that'll make it a lot easier. I don't have to click and drag each time. I can click and just drag it into place rather than make it. And then I can also click and hold shift and click on the second one and copy and paste both at the same time. So that will make it faster. Now we've actually done all of them. Didn't have to wait for that. So we've got all these lines on top of the lens. So what I'll do is click and hold down shift and click on each one of these lines in turn. And then we'll be able to reorder them so that we can move these lines behind the lens, but still in front of the body of the camera. So once I have all these selected, I can right click on one and then go to order, and you can see it's in this menu. And so we've got order, we've got send backward, and then we have send to back. So right now we just want to go backward. We want to go backward a step, and you can see the hotkeys here. And so I go send to backwards, send to backwards. It didn't look like it did much, but it did. We'll go to order, we'll do it again. And we'll keep doing this until it's where we want it to be. And using the hotkeys is faster. But now you can see these two white circles are in front. So it's doing something. You just don't always see. Now the black circle is on, so you can see it's going back just one step at a time. You'll see what happens when I use send to back, because it'll go behind everything. But there we go. So now we've got it all sent. The whole lens is on top of those lines now. It's been reordered. And it's looking good. Now we've got that grip on there. There's little extra details. You can see that this is getting more developed. Now we want to add in a background. So adding in a background, we're going to do a similar thing where we get the shape. Our background should be rectangular like the page that we made. And so I'm going to click and drag and drop that. And then look at that. It's in front of everything. And it's blue. Which is and it has a border. So I'm going to make the border transparent. So I don't want a border. And then I want the background to be red. Yeah, that looks good. Super bright. So now I'm going to right click and go to order. And this time I'll go send to back, all the way back to the very back. Just one click, boom. And so that throws it to the very back. So that comes in really handy. So there we go. We've got a nice looking camera here. You can develop more pieces to it, but those are the basics.